The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chintpowersystems.com to find out more.
Big institutional capital players tend to shy away from smaller scale, middle market type assets for exactly the reasons you highlight, Tim. Each project has their own challenges. Each project has their own nuance, and to be able to diligence that in an efficient manner and still get the scale to get your capital out is not an easy task. We fortunately built a system to do exactly that. So doing those types of projects is our DNA.
Are you speeding the energy transition? Here at the Clean Power Hour, our hosts Tim Montague and John Weaver bring you the best in solar, batteries, and clean technologies every week. Want to go deeper into decarbonization? We do too. We're here to help you understand and command the commercial, residential, and utility solar, wind, and storage industries. So let's get to it. Together we can speed the energy transition.
Today on the Clean Power Hour, investing in the energy transition. My guest is a very storied energy professional. His name is Thomas Byrne. He is the CEO and co-founder of Clean Capital. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Tim, it is great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
I'm really honored to have you on the show. Clean Capital is very well known in the solar industry, and we're grateful for your work. Every solar project on Earth needs capital behind it, and so you're a major player in that space, and we're going to geek out on what Clean Capital is doing. What are the challenges and opportunities of the energy transition? But first, Tom, please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Tim. So I started my career in clean energy as a lawyer. I was a project finance lawyer at Chadbourne and Park, which no longer exists, and then ultimately moved over to Aiken Gump and spent a number of years working on behalf of developers, lenders, any host of stakeholders in the industry, representing them on a wide variety of clean energy deals, mostly wind, actually, back when I started, and then navigated my way to ultimately founding Clean Capital. Founded Clean Capital in 2016 with 3 co-founders to build on my experience as a lawyer and as an investor in the space.
Yeah, I thought I would work in the wind industry before the solar industry because we got a major tranche of wind in around 2008 here in the Midwest. But lo and behold, here I am working in photovoltaics happily. I love the intersection of technology, people, and sustainability. It's such a feel-good. And now we truly have all the technology we need to completely clean the grid and net zero the economy. And that's about 50 gigatons of pollution. There's 1 trillion tons. I like to remind my listeners, there's 1 trillion tons in the atmosphere. So there is a bigger problem there that we all also have to put our eye and ears and brain on. But let's go into Clean Capital. You guys have been at this now for over a decade, financing clean energy projects. What is the sweet spot for you all, and how has that changed over the years?
When we first started Clean Capital, we thought there was an interesting opportunity just buying small scale operating solar projects. It was back in 2016, 2017, it was a relatively untapped market. There weren't a lot of acquirers of these cash flowing assets for a wide variety of reasons. They were too small. The underwriting was quirky with SRECs or virtual net metering. There was all these different programs to navigate. So it was quite an untapped market. We focused on buying those assets and had a really good run of that from 2016 till about 2020, 2021. But it was at that around 2021 when 2 pretty important things happened for Clean Capital. One, we recapitalized our business with Manulife and John Hancock, who came in and they started funding the entirety of our business. And 2, we started to get into development. So we went from just buying operating assets to expanding our mandate into investing in developers and funding their development. And at the same time, also started to get into storage. And so in 2021, a handful of things expanded what we do. And fast forward to today, we are invested in a wide variety of developers, storage and solar predominantly for now, building a wide variety of different types of solar and storage projects, big, small, community solar, behind the meter, front of the meter, all with an eye towards being a thoughtful investor that's advancing the clean energy transition.
And as you and I discussed in the pre-show, here in the U.S. and across the globe, we humans are consuming more and more electricity. And as we make the energy transition, this is going to accelerate, right? Because we're electrifying transportation, we're electrifying heavy industry, and things like HVAC across the board. And so we're going to triple, maybe even quadruple the grid. And this is math that's been done by some very smart people at the national laboratories, et cetera. So it's a well-documented phenomenon. And of course, we can replace that added load with solar, wind, and batteries. There's no question that we can do that. It's a question of how quickly we can do that and how many bumps along the road we're going to meet. So give our listeners a high-level analysis from where you sit, Tom. How is the energy transition going, and what are some of the obstacles that you are currently in the process of overcoming?
From when we started Clean Capital, or even dating back prior to that, the expectation was that climate change would be solved simply by putting more wind, more solar, and ultimately in the last 5 years or so, batteries on the grid, and load would stay relatively stable. And it was just a matter of time and how quickly could we transition the grid to an all renewable energy sustainable grid. What has become abundantly clear in the last number of years is that there is going to be a massive uptick in load, in part from the increase, the conversion to the transition to electric vehicles, in most part, however, due to the increase from data centers, artificial intelligence, chat GPT. All these things are just sucking a ton of energy.
Right.
And that was part of the calculus that I think we took for granted, or perhaps we just couldn't have foresaw only 5 or 10 years ago. And now we have a new reality, which is the increase in electricity demand over the next number of years is going to be far more than we anticipated, far more than the flat demand over the prior 20 years. And now we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to address this increased demand with that same focus on bringing renewable energy to the grid?
Yeah, it is sad, Tom, I have to say. All this wind, solar, and batteries that we're putting on the grid in the last decade is just keeping up with the additional demand that we're putting on the grid by building data centers, which I have nothing against data centers. I use AI tools, I use data centers, I use cloud storage every day, right? It's part of my work day. I can't be an energy professional without those things. And so I guess I'm left wondering, how do we break out of that box? And we have some wonderful things happening, right? We have the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS Act, and this reshoring of solar panel manufacturing and battery manufacturing and EV manufacturing. Those are like really good things for the U.S. economy, good for workers, ultimately good for the environment. And yet it's not enough somehow. So what are we to do about this?
It's interesting because you're correct that with the IRA and certain other policy measures, both at the state and federal level, and in other countries as well, the issue is not, are we going to build a lot of renewable energy in the next 10 years? We're going to build a massive amount of renewable energy in the next 10 years. The questions are, one, is it sufficient enough to put a dent in the increase in temperatures? And two, is it sufficient to meet the load growth that we're going to see from the technology industry? And the answer, unfortunately, on both of those is no. And that's why you're seeing a lot of utilities starting to change their policies to try increasing their CapEx expectations over the next years to deal with a lot of the increase in demand.
Mm-hmm.
So that therefore, if it's insufficient to get us to the place that we need to be, both in satisfying the increased demand and two, curbing greenhouse gases, then there has to be a massive policy measure if we're serious about addressing climate change.
Yeah, or perhaps some kind of greater, for lack of a better expression, spiritual awakening. Like, capitalism is an amazing tool. It has given us the good life that you and I enjoy here in the United States. And it works really well. When you incentivize investors with a return on investment, it happens. And it creates this perpetual motion machine in a way, right? And ultimately, we have all these free photons raining down on us from the sun, thousands and thousands of times more than we actually need, which is the foundation for solar, wind, and really all of life on Earth. And then you combine that with capitalism, and it truly is an amazing opportunity, an engine for good. But there's also aspects of that capitalist system, of course, that is creating climate change, right? We're pumping fossil pollution into the atmosphere. It's invisible largely, right? When you look up, you don't see a garbage dump, you see the blue sky, and it still looks pristine. Unfortunately, we're at 420 ppm. PPMs are going up, not down. So we're just putting on the brakes a little bit, right? We're slowing the rate of increase, but we're not putting a dent. We need to get back to 300, actually. I would encourage my listeners to check out my interview with peterfikowski.com. He is my favorite author and scientist who's really going after some natural solutions to that problem of getting from 420 to 300. And I don't think capitalism is going to solve that problem, but there are some variants. And I don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole, Tom, because I know that's not necessarily why we're here today. But I do think it's important that we stand on the shoulders of these really good platforms, capitalism, democracy, clean energy technology, where, and we here in the United States have been very central. We're not the only ones, but in terms of inventing and bringing that stuff to the market, we are very much part of that, as is China, as is Europe, etc. So I guess, what is your message to other professionals in clean energy as to how they can influence the energy transition?
I think the points that you bring up that I think are true are, one, I don't think we should be unrealistic about the expectations of society. Like, we're not going to ask people to start turning off computers, not using cars.
Right.
You can absolutely encourage folks to increase their energy efficiency, but even that will only do so much. We are going to advance as a society. Technology is going to continue to advance and continue to be a major energy consumer, an increasing energy consumer in the next decade, the next 2 decades. And therefore, through that lens, you have to look at the solutions. And you bring up, you touched briefly on some interesting solutions. I think there's more chatter about what used to be pie in the sky solutions to climate. There's more chatter and more conviction around them and more momentum behind them than there was only 2 or 3 years ago. So I think looking at a holistic solution that bridges us towards the 100% zero emission renewable energy source, renewable energy grid is very credible now. And I think it's a topic that needs to be discussed.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 3-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes 3-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chintpowersystems.com to find out more. One of the themes that emerges in my interviews on this show, time and time again, is that we need to bring down the cost of clean energy. And to like a penny a kWh.
Mhm.
with solar and battery. And that unlocks a lot of things like green hydrogen, for example. What do you and your colleagues at Clean Capital think about, given the framework that we have in the US, where we have these regulated monopoly utilities? That system has served us well, but it is very obvious to many energy professionals that system is also outdated. But what is your analysis of the system, so to speak? Yeah, we need better legislation. Okay. But what is going to be a breakthrough in terms of reducing the cost of energy in the next 20 years when it comes to clean energy?
You've seen it with solar previously, and you're seeing it real time with batteries, that just getting scale alone is going to bring down significant amount of costs in both solar and storage and wind. One challenge you face, though, and it's you can have this idyllic goal in mind, but then you get into the details, and the details now are, well, we're talking about tariffs on panels right now. That's going to increase the cost of solar. On the one hand, as we discussed, the idea of bringing costs down, which is the idyllic goal, you are then brought back to earth of the reality of the world we live in, which is the cost of solar will probably go up from where it is today over the next 12 to 24 months as if tariffs are continuing to be rolled out. So that's the policy reality that we live in, and we've always lived in with solar and storage. Getting to a dollar, or would you say it's one cent per?
Yeah, 1 cent per kWh or dollar a megawatt hour.
Yeah, that I would love to see. Our business would thrive if solar and storage got down to those levels, and that may indeed be what's needed to make it a ubiquitous grid. But there's a lot of things in the way of getting down to those levels.
Yeah. This whole business of onshoring manufacturing it's great for our economy in many respects, but it is challenging when you pay a living wage to create solar panels at a price that's cheaper than what they can create in China.
And building projects. The biggest cost increase for us in solar projects over the last year has been the labor associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
The panel prices have actually come down quite a bit over the last 18 months or so, and storage battery prices are coming down as well, but labor is going up. That could be in part because of demand for labor, that could be inflationary trends. Whatever the reason is, that the labor component of building, you still need people to build and operate solar projects, right?
Yeah.
So you're not going to be able to eliminate that from the equation, and therefore there's always going to be a meaningful cost to building solar projects regardless of the equipment.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about ways of cracking that nut? I'm involved with a robotics company. I serve as an advisor to a company called Luminous, and they are making a robot to install solar panels. And
oh, really?
It's technology that will augment the workforce and do some of the very repetitive heavy lifting that today humans are doing. It doesn't supplant humans. It just augments what the humans are doing. Let the humans do the fine work, the connecting of the wires, the bolting of the panel to the racking, but let the robot carry 1 million solar panels, right? Do you think we can automate our way to lower labor costs on solar construction?
You're definitely going to be able to gain efficiencies through technology. To what extent it automates, who knows? We started using drones on our sites to conduct O&M, to check panels, and we started doing that 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
In some cases, and that's an example of technology serving a role, so we don't have to actually roll trucks out to that site as often as we
for sure
need to. So there's going to be continued technology advancements in how we're building these solar projects for sure. Whether we get to 90% automation, I don't know. I think you still need people to build these solar projects.
Oh, yeah.
And you still need people to design them, though that will probably, you can foresee an artificial intelligence or an automation component to that. So there's I think there's going to be an unleashing of technology on all aspects of our business that make the development, designing, building and maintain operations of solar projects.
Yeah.
That's battery projects, wind projects, much more efficient.
I'm curious, in your own core business, the business of financing and developing clean energy projects, does technology or the development of technology platforms bear in any large way?
We actually built our own technology platform to support the diligence of our projects. So we actually have firsthand knowledge of building software ourselves. We had a technology team in-house that actually did that, and it continues to be the diligence platform that we use. We call it DOC. It has since spun off. It's its own freestanding business. But we see a lot of interesting technology platforms, software platforms that we touch in all aspects of our business that are just increasing processes and workflows. That's where I see it mostly focused. It helps us maintain projects, being able to have much clearer visibility into the production of projects. That's where we're seeing it on a pretty regular basis at this point. There's a lot of great platforms out there.
I'm looking at your website, and you have a lovely map of all the projects that you're involved in, and it reflects the solar industry. But if you're listening to this and you're a project developer looking to either get support for the development process or acquisition of your projects, give our listeners some information about what it is that Clean Capital is looking for in the world of clean energy.
Clean Capital tends to look at projects. It falls into two buckets. One, the first bucket is what I would call middle market. And I use middle market to describe anything that's between residential and big utility. We have our largest project right now is a 37 megawatt utility project. We sell to the utility, but we also have a bunch of behind the meter, small scale projects where we're selling to mush customers and corporate customers. So that is the world in which we tend to operate, is the 1 megawatt to 75 megawatt scale. We do behind the meter, front of the meter, community solar, and we tend to do, we're increasingly looking at non-utility scale, right? It's not selling to a utility off-taker. We also take pride in doing projects that are a little quirkier, I would say. We are one of the best in the business at developing on brownfields and Superfund sites and reclaimed coal mines and coal plants. That's a sort of bread and butter of what we do. We have a number of really exciting projects that are turning these discarded pieces of land into electrons through solar power and storage. We also we've invested in a developer in Alaska. We now are the current owner of the largest solar project in Alaska. It's an 8 megawatt project in Houston, and we are currently in development of a project that's going to be even bigger than that. So we own a large project in Guam. Guam is very old school. They're generating most of their power from diesel and intense fossil fuels. So bringing renewable energy to a place like that actually has a pretty big impact on that island's emissions. So we tend to gravitate towards projects. We do that middle market stuff, and that's our bread and butter, but we also really like projects that are advancing clean energy in ways that perhaps people don't expect, or perhaps have an added value set to it.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned brownfield. We have thousands of brownfields, including landfills and contaminated sites around the United States that really you can't do a whole lot with. You can turn them into parks and golf courses. In 2 weeks, I'm going to drop an interview. So by the time people hear this, it'll be out there in the wild. An interview with Scott Tess at the city of Urbana here in my backyard in central Illinois, where they've developed several community solar projects on their closed municipal landfills. And I'm just a huge fan, a developer dedicated to brownfield solar development. And so that's a great topic. I'm glad to hear that that's something that Clean Capital is paying attention to. It's not for everyone. It is trickier, right? It is more complex to develop these projects. And so you need passionate developers and financiers like yourselves to get them across the finish line. I'm curious, you mentioned Guam, a island nation, and islands are some of the earlier adopters of clean energy because they're bringing all their fuel to the islands by boats, everything they consume pretty much many times. And so things are expensive. Electricity might be in the 30 plus cent range on islands. And so solar and batteries are a great opportunity. And I don't know if you want to say more about the types of projects, though, and the profile, so to speak, of projects that you guys are interested in. The middle market is obviously a big market, but in some regards, it is also a more challenging market, right? Because every project tends to be nuanced and different.
Yeah, and we've taken advantage of that to some extent, is that the big institutional capital players tend to shy away from smaller scale, middle market type assets for exactly the reasons you highlight, Tim. Each project has their own challenges. Each project has their own nuance, and to be able to diligence that in an efficient manner and still get the scale to get your capital out is not an easy task. We fortunately built a system to do exactly that. So doing those types of projects is our DNA. We do smaller scale, quirkier projects, and we have an exceptional team and an exceptional platform to do it in a much more efficient way, and therefore be able to get the scale to get to a meaningful full scale. With respect to the brownfields, it really is brownfields, landfills, everything that falls under that bucket too. Two things. One, we are finally having an incentive through the IRA to actually support the added cost of building on brownfields. I think that was a real positive thing that came out of the IRA, so that we can have this really full cycle sustainability story where it's not just replace greenhouse gases with clean energy, but it's actually reclaiming these sites that were used and no longer have a good use to now use them to support clean energy.
When you look in your crystal ball, you mentioned earlier that a lot of solar and battery projects are going to get built in the next 10 years. There's just no doubt about that, right? But what are your predictions for how your company is going to evolve as the markets evolve? Do you have any grand predictions? Are there things that you're going to grow into as the energy transition matures?
When we started the company, storage was impossible. I think we probably were starting to read about battery storage in 2016, but there was not any meaningful deployment of storage yet in the market. I don't think we saw our first storage deal till 2018 or 2019. Community solar was only done in Minnesota at the time, and that's now done in 20 or so states. There were 15 to 20 states have some version of community solar supporting it. We view ourselves as on the front lines of investing and developing in the space. We are very mindful and pay very close attention to new verticals, new asset classes that crop up as the clean energy transition continues to go in force. As an example, over the last year, we've paid much more attention to mobility and EV infrastructure as the EV market continues to grow, both fleets of EV vehicles and in terms of commercial fleets, and also for individual customers. That's a segment of the business that's tangential to what we do at Clean Capital as a clean energy provider, but it's logical. It's a logical and tangential place for us to start looking. We haven't invested any dollars yet in EV infrastructure, but I could see that as a place where we go over the next year or two. And we continue to, I think any investor, any developer in the space has to continue to pivot and evolve as a company. We are paying much more attention to the technology, the corporate use of power. All of these big data centers that all the big tech companies are going to be building over the next 5 years are going to need a lot of clean energy. So how do they become a customer of Clean Capital and our peers and our competitors? Because it's going to be an insatiable demand for it, and that's a sector we have to be advancing in as well.
Yeah, it's almost as if you're a technology company, you are an energy company. And whether you develop those projects yourselves or own them or just work with partners, one way or another, you need clean electrons for those data centers.
Yeah, and you're seeing some of the big tech companies buying nuclear plants, and they're figuring out ways to power these data centers. They are power companies to some extent, whether they like it or not.
I think we are out of time, Tom. Unfortunately, I'm going to let you go. I want all of our listeners to check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love hearing from my listeners. And you can also contact me via the website, cleanpowerhour.com. How can our listeners find you, Tom?
You can find us on LinkedIn. We go to our LinkedIn page for Clean Capital and the corresponding team members. Cleancapital.com is our website. If you want to reach out to us, there's contact information there. We'd love to talk to any developers, any owners of solar and storage projects that are looking for a good capital partner.
Very well. I want to thank Thomas Byrne, CEO and co-founder of Clean Capital, for coming on the show today. I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Hey, listeners. This is Tim. I want to give a shout out to all of you. I do this for you twice a week. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us your time. I really appreciate you and what you're all about. You are part and parcel of the energy transition, whether you're an energy professional today or an aspiring energy professional. So thank you. I want to let you know that the Clean Power Hour has launched a listener survey, and it would mean so much to me if you would go to cleanpowerhour.com, click on the About Us link right there on the main navigation. That takes you to the About page, and you'll see a big graphic, Listener Survey. Just click on that graphic, and it takes just a couple of minutes. If you fill out the survey, I will send you a lovely baseball cap with our logo on it. The other thing I want our listeners to know is that this podcast is made possible by corporate sponsors. We have Chin Power Systems, the leading three-phase string inverter manufacturer in North America. So check out CPS America. But we are very actively looking for additional support to make this show work. And you see here our media kit with all the sponsor benefits and statistics about the show. We're dropping 2 episodes a week. We have now over 320,000 downloads on YouTube, and we're getting about 45,000 downloads per month. So this is a great way to bring your brand to our listeners, and our listeners are decision makers in clean energy. This includes project executives, engineers, finance, project management, and many other professionals who are making decisions about and developing, designing, installing, and making possible clean energy projects. So check out cleanpowerhour.com, both our listener survey on the About Us and our media kit, and become a sponsor today. Thank you so much. Let's grow solar and storage. The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chinpowersystems.com to find out more.